Earlier this week, AIG announced the sale of its Alico unit to MetLife for $15.5 billion. The deal, however, requires the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and AIG to shoulder as much as $450 million each in losses. For more, we're joined by the man who has been all over this story, as well as AIG, Bloomberg News reporter Hugh. Now, Hugh, I read your story about how the New York Fed may, again, this is all dependent on how these assets perform, lose $450 million on some commercial mortgages in Japan. It reminded me of the deal that the New York Fed did with J.P. Morgan and Bear Stearns, insulating J.P. Morgan from some $29 billion in potential losses on Bear Stearns assets. This is a far smaller deal, but in principle, kind of the same thing.
Right. Well, on the one hand, it's very common for when these type of deals happen, for when a buyer is sort of concerned about these iffy assets it's about to inherit, for this type of thing to happen. Now, on the other hand, this is you could argue that this is a lot like what the Fed has done in a lot of other parts of the AIG bailout, which is protect an AIG counterparty on real estate assets.
But one difference here is in the case of J.P. Morgan and Bear Stearns, the Fed just wanted to make sure that that deal got done for systemic reasons. Here, the Fed is doing this deal in order to help itself in a way, because it needs to get repaid by AIG. Explain how that works.
Well, people close to the situation have let me know that the Fed is actually pretty comfortable with this loss-sharing agreement. They feel like they're going to be ahead when the proceeds from this sale go through. They're getting about $8 billion in stock, and so that $8 billion is going to be in a special purpose vehicle. As losses on these Japanese commercial mortgages come in, they'll pay out against these losses, and their exposure is about $500 million.
Okay, so on the one hand, as you say, the New York Fed is comfortable with its exposure to these Japanese commercial mortgages, but on the other hand, presumably, it was MetLife that was asking for this indemnification because they're not so comfortable. So how should shareholders feel? How should the taxpayer feel? Because we're the ones who stand to lose if the government and the Fed don't recover the money that was given to AIG.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think it's helpful to look at this in the big picture. They're garnering about $15.5 billion in the Alico sale to MetLife. A year ago, they would have gotten a lot less. What this basically means that instead of getting $15.5 billion, they might get $15 billion.
Right, to put it in perspective, $6.8 billion in cash already going to the New York Fed from this deal.
Exactly.
The rest of it, as you point out, is tied up in this stock. And to the degree that they lose anything, it's only going to reduce the stock portion of that deal that they have yet to get over a period of time.
Exactly.
So you're sitting there from a taxpayer standpoint. The people you're talking to, do they advise us to feel relatively comfortable with the terms of these deals, given the fact that $450 million is not a huge portion of $15.5 billion, and for them to lose all $450, the mortgages would have to go to zero?
Right, which nobody really thinks is going to happen. I mean, I think this is another instance in which, although it's very common for this type of arrangement to happen on Wall Street, that you have these complications when the New York Fed is involved, and they're open to a lot more scrutiny and obviously a lot more concern.
Hugh, thank you so much. Bloomberg reporter Hugh joining us to talk about his AIG story. Another big break for Hugh.